Next curve.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this Rethink podcast. I'm Leonard Lee, Managing Director of NextCurve, and today I have a very special guest, Chris PEARSON, President of 5G America, is here with me to discuss Open RAN and the future of interoperability and openness in 5G. And it's great to have you again, Chris, and it's been a while. I think the last time we had you on, we were chatting about edge computing or something like that, right?
Yeah, I think we were. Thanks for having me back. It's always an honor to speak with you.
Absolutely. And why don't you take a moment to tell our audience about 5G Americas and a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Yeah, 5G Americas is an industry association dedicated to progressing mobile communications throughout the Americas. So that's North, Central, and South America. And we work in three main areas: technical facilitation and coordination, regulatory policy for governments throughout the Americas, and finally, industry education. So this growing wireless ecosystem that we have, we want to make sure everyone understands it well, is moving forward and moving in the right direction.
Awesome. Well, it's great.
As myself, I'm
the
president of the association. I've been there for quite some time, ever since it was founded, and I'm in charge of really executing the strategy and operations of the association.
Yeah, and just a stand-up great guy. And well, it's great to have you with us again, and especially to talk about this really interesting topic of the Open RAN movement, which is quickly gaining traction over the last 12 months, I would say, especially with the Rakuten Mobile rollout of their LTE network in Japan back in April of last year, and then subsequent launch of their 5G network at the end of last summer. And all of a sudden, it seems like Open RAN and ORAN have the boost they need to, let's say, change the telco tech conversation. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I mean, there's quite a bit of momentum with Open RAN in general as far as the movement. A lot of interest, a lot of operators that, as you've seen, putting out RFIs, requests for information, trying to get better background and knowledge of exactly everything. And then there's, on the other side, there's a lot of companies that are, would be considered vendor companies or infrastructure, right, and even software and hardware companies that are really interested in pushing the envelope and really working hard on the Open RAN movement. So there's a lot of, I guess, momentum in the industry that's going on right now. Yeah.
So before we get into our discussion, what I wanted to do really quickly here is plug another great 5G America's white paper. I have to do this, right?
Yeah, that's great.
To do it. And it's entitled, for our audience, it's entitled Transition Toward Open and Interoperable Networks. And it's a really great, I mean, I've read it, and it's a really great overview of what is going on in the Open RAN movement, all the bits and pieces, as well as some really great perspectives. So congratulations to the 5G America team, as well as all the partners who contributed to that piece. It's actually really, really cool. Can I say cool? It's a cool piece.
Yeah. Cool. That's all good.
So let's level set on the agenda for our audience here for this discussion. And so, folks, what we'll be talking about are the following. Number one, we'll start off with a discussion on what is the Open RAN movement and why it's important. Number two, the benefits of the open and interoperable network technologies that are emerging. Then number three, the challenges in realizing networks with open and interoperable tech. And then we'll close things off with a bit of a chat on the Open RAN future of 5G in the Americas, and how do we see the movement impacting 5G evolution in the US? Okay?
Yes.
All right. So, Chris, why don't we start off with that first piece? So your paper actually does a really great job. The 5G Americas paper does a really great job of explaining what the Open RAN movement is. So, you mind sharing with us what are some of the key components that are kind of driving this movement?
Sure. I think some of the if you look at where we are with technology and not just within wireless, but outside of wireless. I mean, we're looking at ways to be more innovative, more faster to market, more opportunity for really what we consider more off-the-shelf and capabilities. So if you look at our paper, it details out some of the advantages as well as some of the complexities technically of moving to Open RAN. But I think that in general, what you're looking at is a movement for really more interoperability in wireless communications that would be considered open. That's Open RAN. And the last part of that we haven't had historically in wireless is the radio access network. You've had some of these capabilities in other parts of the network, but when it comes to the radio access network, it's kind of the one of the last pieces to have more what would be considered interoperability amongst multiple vendors and those types of interfaces on the interfaces.
Right. And so there's a number of organizations that are kind of promoting this Open RAN movement, right? Number one, you have TIP, which has Open RAN, and then you have the O-RAN Alliance that is doing all the O-RAN stuff. We get those things a little bit confused, I think, right?
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. If you look at the overall 5G wireless standards and for communications and 5G and so forth, what you've seen is 3GPP, Third Generation Partnership Project, really has the umbrella. They work with all the standards organizations. They also even they also work with 5G Americas and other what are called market representation partners. And so 3GPP did the overall architecture for 5G, even though it's called 3GPP.
Right.
So what happens is when it came to the open interfaces, there was much more work that needed to be done. So that's when you had other organizations step in, similar to or some of you mentioned, but like the O-RAN Alliance, to say that there is much more work that needs to be done to move this Open RAN movement along. And so therefore you have the O-RAN Alliance with the O-RAN specs to help move that. And so that's where a lot of work's done, but it's also being done in a lot of the other areas that you mentioned. 3GPP is our overall 5G standard, the network architecture that was in place to allow this to happen. But more specifically, there was a lot more work that needed to be done.
Right. And I think what you're looking at here is exactly what you're saying, is the evolution of an open architecture expression of the 5G standards that are established by 3GPP. I think that's an important thing to clarify. And that, to me, the way I look at O-RAN is it really specifies the framework for an open framework or common framework for the interfaces like you mentioned, right? So it's almost like an architecture in a sense, whereas when you look at what TIP is doing, you're looking at standards for how you design hardware and software that can be compliant with O-RAN type principles, right? So that's almost like an infrastructure expression of not only what is being defined by 3GPP for the 5G standards, but O-RAN in terms of the interface and architectures that are kind of shaping how the Open RAN architecture is going to form, I suppose.
Yeah. So if you look at it, you have to have open hardware, open software, open interfaces, all within the cellular wireless network. And before, this would be considered in essence proprietary because you had one infrastructure vendor do this. So now if you start to say, okay, I want company X, company Y, company Z, all to be able to have plug and play. Therefore, there's a much more, activities or standards or specifications that need to be set so that make sure that when X plugs into Y and Y plugs into Z and an operator chooses X, Y, and Z, then they all work. And so that's why I think that you've seen this. And the overall umbrella was there under 3GPP, but there's a lot more work that needed to be done, as you mentioned.
Right, right. And, I think there's still a lot of work to be done, right?
Yes.
Because it's really, what's really required here is a mature ecosystem, which
Yeah.
you can argue is may or may not be here quite yet. But I think that's why what Rakuten Mobile has done has been such a big thing, right? And
Yeah.
especially as you look at what they're looking to do with RCP, these are things that contribute to the formation of the ecosystem, or at least drives that, because a lot of these standards and API libraries and reference architectures, those alone don't make these things happen in the field, right?
Right. Yeah. And I think if you read our paper at 5G America's
Yeah.
website, it actually will show that when we talk about Open RAN, we were very much trying to be technically accurate about where we are and what are the
Yeah.
what we call possible advantages and possible complexities, because
Right.
we're very early in the cycle. You've mentioned some operators that have been early in that cycle, and there's different challenges that could be associated, or possible challenges, and there's certain possible advantages. So we wanted to make sure that we provided an accurate
Yeah.
technical representation of the open RAN.
Yeah, great. So why don't we move on to the next topic here, which is the benefits of open and interoperable network tech. So in the white paper, you guys have this really great diagram that outlines 6 of the I would call them aspirational benefits,
Yep.
because there aren't that many ORAN compliant, open RAN based networks out there today. There's a
Right.
lot of pilots going on. You have Vodafone, you
Yep.
have Telefonica and others
Yep.
jumping onto this new trend. But you cite 6 benefits, and the first of which is avoiding vendor lock-in.
Yep.
The other is reducing costs. The next one is quick time to market, or accelerating the time to market. The next one is best of breed, and I suppose that means best of breed solutions or components or software or what have you, right?
Yep. All of those. Yep.
And then having the benefit of spurring innovation. And then finally, participating in the hardware and software development. So I suppose that means being able to have more parties participating in the overall development of the hardware and software standards going forward,
Yeah.
sort of like consortia type.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So if you think about those, and again we put those in the paper very clear. I mean, you call them aspirational advantages, and I think that's a good way of stating it.
Yeah.
Because again, we're early in this process. But what it does is the paper outlines the fact that if you have multiple companies that are able to begin thinking about Open RAN and and mobile communications in a new way, and providing competition and the best of breed of like innovations, whether it's actually the equipment, whether it's the use case, whatever it might be, all these types of things add up to what would be considered a diverse ecosystem in the open radio access network, which is something that we haven't had before. So I like the way you say aspiration, but yeah, these would be aspirations, and what we would say in the paper is the possible advantages of moving to an open RAN system. And it really just gets down to the difference between having one company in charge of your RAN, or having multiple companies that all can work together. You might have a system integrator that's in charge of it all, possibly. Again,
Right.
it just depends on the situation.
Right.
And each of them being best of breed of what they do and how they do it, and it all coming together in your network.
Yeah, and I you're making a really good point here. that I just want to build on, that this whole sourcing, the question of sourcing, right? Whether or not you go with a single vendor and basically adopt their overall infrastructure, architecture, their vision for what the RAN should look like versus taking more of a open approach, right? Where you might be dealing with a mix of vendors at different levels or different aspects of the RAN, and stitching things together, right? Here, things are more packaged with the traditional vendors, like the big three, if you want to call them that.
Right.
And then now what we're looking at is more of a more open architectural option for operators, right? It's almost like an architectural decision that they have to make because, right now, most of them are working with the big three and they have a mix of products from these guys in their portfolio. Right. Now you have this broader question of now how do we make all these things in the open world, in this open RAN world, work together? How do we then optimize them as well, and then orchestrate our business on top of this more open infrastructure concept that maybe they haven't considered before, or they may have had in the past. It's just that we've moved more toward a consolidation in these three big players that kind of dominate the market today.
Yeah. So what you're saying is, in a sense, as we move maybe to the those are the aspirations or possible advantages.
Right.
The possible other side would be why would somebody not choose to do this?
Yeah.
And so I guess that's on the other side, and that's what in our white paper again we say these are there are some possible challenges to moving to an open RAN situation, I guess. And we list those out too. And some of those, I don't know if you want to talk about them. I know that.
Yeah. Well, why don't I just list them out here? So you have high frequency bandwidth, low latency challenges, right? And I assume that has to do with having hardware that's on, up to par with what's currently being offered by the big three or the integrated players, right? Reliability and availability. I suspect that's a little bit of the same, right? Virtualization security. So I know that there's a comment in the paper about the disaggregated nature and the multi-vendor nature of the open RAN universe, kind of making the security aspect a little bit more risky, I suppose.
Yeah.
Or challenging. Let's use the word challenging.
Possibly challenging.
Yeah.
Again, so if you're I'll go ahead. I'll let you finish and then I'll.
Yeah. So new hardware and software requirements, and then there's the interoperability question, and then finally complex automation.
Yeah. So what that represents, again, I'm going to go back to just as we had aspirations and possible advantages, these would be the opposite of aspirations and would be considered possible challenges. So some of this has to do with the complexity of right now. If I'm an operator in my network and I have a radio access network, it's pretty much going to be proprietary. I mean, it's based on a standard, but it's going to be one infrastructure vendor. And so what happens is that company's in charge of everything. And there's not, when it comes to security, is there a security risk with anything we do in today's world? Yes, but you're dealing with less what would be considered threat surfaces, right? Whereas if you have lots of open interfaces and different vendors and so forth, then you have more threat surfaces. Not again, this is being addressed by the technical work that's being done in the O-RAN Alliance, actually, even. So is there more complexity or potential complexity when, okay, right now I have one person running my radio access network. Now I might have best of breed in many different areas of infrastructure and components and so forth, all interfacing and working together, but that could bring in more complexity to my radio access network. And then it becomes, well, operationally, what if something is not working? What happens? Well, that brings complexity, and I think what you'll see is there'll be system integrators that will be in charge with an operator that will be, that they have, when the buck stops here, operator is going to have somebody in charge to be able to call and work out these things. So, and then finally, the idea of automation and so forth. When you're your own company running a radio access network, there's going to be obviously automation involved in everything that you do. That's where our networks are going. We say in our paper, the human person can't keep up with what goes on in a network now. And right now, that is happening. The kind of artificial intelligence and automation and everything that's happening with one vendor. And now you have to bring that across many vendors because you're opening up everything, hardware, software, interfaces. And so that is, again, a complexity to it. But again, these are what are called possible complexities, just like I had possible advantages where, 5G Americas is the Switzerland of just writing a technical paper about this.
Right.
And I think you'll see that most of, this is being worked on by the industry to be overcome. And you're already seeing, as you said, trials or actually announcements for Open RAN networks. So there's a ton of progress being made on all these fronts.
Right. And I think, many of these items that you have as challenges, like you said, are pretty common regardless. When you look at what an operator, a typical, let's say, traditional operator deals with in their portfolio of technology is pretty heterogeneous. It's not necessarily singular, and you have many generations of of technology in that portfolio. And so, at least going forward with 5G, I think there's an opportunity for operators to set a new direction, and then infuse some of the benefits, or at least realize some of the aspirational benefits that you outline in your paper. So I think that's one of the things that operators should think about as they look at Open RAN. And it could very well be the case that going forward you do have a mix of Open RAN plus some of the big three stuff. Right.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's not like the big three. The big three aren't going anywhere. I mean, they. But if you look at some of the forecasts from analysts, research analysts about the market size of Open RAN, I mean, it's nowhere but up, right? I mean, we're talking about billions and billions of dollars and billions of market size growth in Open RAN over the next 5-6 years, and each forecast is different. About how big it will be, but we're seeing a lot of momentum in it. So it's there, but each operator will have to kind of make their own decisions on really, what's appropriate for them, given their assets, also given their legacy, not legacy, but I mean, existing networks and how they're set up. An operator that might be new to a market with new spectrum might look at it differently than one that's got 100 million customers that's working well in a network, and innovation is doing well with their vendors. So everyone's timing and analysis of Open RAN as an operator will be different. But basically, if you look at all the different analysts, third-party analysts, they say this is going to be a big market someday.
Right. Yeah, and I think one of the key determinants of that is the architectural decision by CTOs to adopt the Open RAN standards. Right. I think that's one of the. So I mean, one of the things I'm going to be really curious about is how those forecasts will look going forward as people start to think a little bit. I have a prediction that people will think a little bit differently about how they categorize the Open RAN market going forward. But
anyways, can you share that with us today? Or you're just giving us a teaser?
I'm not quite sure that it's necessarily a meaningful market category. I mean, it's equipment. Equipment is equipment.
I see.
Software is software. It's going to be really difficult to segment that market and qualify it the way that I think some folks are doing. So anyways, but that doesn't mean that it's not going to be an important trend within the ICT technology domain. Right. I think it's going to be very important. In fact, I think it's a very important consideration for CTOs that are operating today's
I would say,
as they look forward, especially, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say every CTO of any major wireless communication, any cellular operator is following this very closely. And they're following it closely, whether they're putting resources into it or not, or just kind of waiting and following it. There's no doubt they're following it. Now, again, I think each one of them has to make their own decisions about what, when, and where, and what they want to do. But again, according to the third parties, there's a lot of momentum, and I think our paper outlines why there's momentum, but at the same time also why there's challenges. But I think every CTO out there that's in charge of that's a cellular operator's CTO, is watching this closely to see how fast they progress. Many of these areas that some of those challenges, and also how those early market either trials or early launches are going.
Yeah, and for sure, the big three are looking at this very closely as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Huawei, they're not. They're going to be a part of the networks for a long time.
Yeah,
they actually are all part of the open RAN movement in different, maybe viewed differently depending on how you want to view them, but they're definitely all involved in different ways. So and they're not going anywhere. So
right.
And they've been very very strong competitors, very strong companies. So that we'll just it'll be one of those let's just there's more to this story, and we'll be watching.
And gee, I wonder what would happen to those ORAN forecasts if these guys actually became part of the ORAN and Open RAN movement.
Yeah, well, some of them are. Remember, some of them are. So,
Nokia
so it's not. It's just more of it's all kind of the different slices and how it will be figured out. So,
Right. Yeah, wonderful. So why don't we talk about our last bit here, which is the Open RAN future of 5G Americas, and how you see the movement kind of shaping the evolution of 5G in the U.S. and other, the Americas. The
Americas, yeah. So 5G Americas, we look at North, Central, and South America, so and represent it. And it's hard to say when you look at Open RAN specifics to the U.S. and Latin America. Right now, as an example, in Latin America, we have some very strong operators, super regional operators, and I think they all have an interest in it. In fact, some of them have talked about trials in not maybe Latin America, but the other countries. So we know that they're looking at it. But Latin America right now, with the trying to rebound from the economic crisis back in 2008, 2009, and now with COVID, it's a challenging market in general. But so it's hard to we're not in the area of forecasting. North America, I think you've seen a lot of movement in companies really always looking to virtualize and move forward in all these different areas, because we are in North America a technology leader, not just in wireless, but a technology leader when it comes to all types of things, and whether it's cloud or edge computing, these types of things. So I think there's a lot of interest, but at the same time, I think the various companies that are involved in looking at this opportunity are in different area, different phases. So I think just my original comment that I think every CTO of wireless company is looking at this closely doesn't mean that I'm going to sit here and forecast anyone's launching in the U.S. But you see that they're all involved in these basically different standards organizations or technical groups, if you want to call them that, that are working on this. So so long answer, but pretty difficult to know exactly in the Americas exactly when, where, and how big and how soon
Right.
this movement will take us. So,
Right.
but again, a lot of momentum, according to the third-party analysts.
Right. And we have Dish,
Yeah.
right? Can't
Yeah.
forget them. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that could be the first Open RAN, ORAN network in the United States, right? So
Yeah, it's hard. And again, we don't forecast. 5G Americans doesn't forecast.
Keep our
But
fingers crossed.
we'll let Leonard Lee do the forecast. Everyone tune in to Leonard Lee and next curve, and that way we'll get.
We're actually pretty bullish and excited about Open RAN, but like you said, we're also very cautiously optimistic. We just know that there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And there's a lot of things that need to go right. But at the end of the day, this is, this industry is about scale. And so that's one of the things that the folks in the Open RAN movement, whether you're a vendor, you're a service provider, or what have you, you're an operator, it's something that you're going to be thinking about. And so at the end of the day, that's what will ultimately shape what happens with Open RAN. That's coming from me.
Yeah.
This isn't. I may or may not be in the paper. I don't recall reading it, but I know that you like to reside in Switzerland when it comes to these types of things. So.
Yeah.
But Chris, thanks for joining me to discuss this very exciting and timely topic. Why don't you take a moment to let our audience know how to get in touch with 5G Americas and access some of these great white papers that you guys have?
Yeah, thanks. It's great being here talking to you, Leonard. And for our white papers, they're all free downloadable papers. And just go to www.5gamericas.org. That's ORG. At that website, you'll find all of our news, as well as a section that says white papers, and you'll be able to download them free of charge. And I really welcome the opportunity to be on the show. And thank you so much.
Absolutely. And, you should really check out the white paper on URLLC. If you really want to nerd out
there we go.
on URLLC, check out that paper. And I think there was some fantastic contribution from your members that went into that paper. It's super nerdy, but very, very good. Very well done. So thank you so much, Chris. And to our listeners and viewers, thanks for joining us. Please subscribe to our YouTube and Apple Podcast channels and visit us at www.next-curve.com. And until next time, be safe and stay healthy. Chris, always great to have you. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you. Stay safe. Stay healthy.
You too. Bye.
Bye.
Visit us at www.next-curve.com.